testnet sats. I've restored that same wallet that I installed on my mobile device. I've restored that in Sparrow, okay, which is just a Bitcoin wallet software for my desktop. And that's allowed me to access that same wallet, the keys to that same wallet, using my desktop instead of my mobile wallet. So wallets aren't necessarily confined to the platform that they're created on. You can create a wallet on a mobile device, but you can restore that wallet on a mobile, on a desktop, or you can create it on a desktop and you can restore it to a hardware wallet, and so so on and so forth. They all basically use exactly the same standard. So I'll go over here to send. I'm going to paste Destiny's Bitcoin address. I'm going to label this as I'll just say Signet test transaction. I'm going to send 10,000 sats through to Destiny, which if that was real Bitcoin, it would be about $8.85. But of course, it's just pretend Bitcoin. Over here, you'll see I can set my fee. So if we have a look, we'll go and have a look again at mempool. And you can have it was, I remember, around 4 sats per virtual byte, those of you that noticed. So that fee hasn't really moved since we last looked. So that fee estimation that Sparrow's giving me is spot on. I'm happy to send this transaction at 4 sats per virtual byte, which is currently considered high priority. Now, if I wasn't in a hurry for this transaction, I could pay a lower fee, and then it would just take a bit longer for the transaction to confirm. And maybe that's a good idea that we do that. Let's have a quick look. I just want to, sometimes it's nice to actually have, in a demonstration like this, to have the transaction sitting in the mempool for a little while before it confirms, so that we can actually wait for it to confirm. So I'm having a look here. Well, the truth is, actually, at the moment, it seems that even 0 sats per virtual byte fees are clearing on Signet. So I think whatever fee I set there, it's going to go through likely in the next block. Let's see. Anyway, I'm going to send that at 4 sats per virtual byte. Don't worry about any of this at the moment. We will come into fees and stuff a little bit later. And of course, on different wallets, this looks slightly different. So in green wallets or blue wallets, even though you'll be doing the same thing, you would paste in the Bitcoin address, you'd put in the amount that you want to send. Typically, your blue wallets and your green wallets won't require you necessarily to label the transaction. It'll automatically label it for you, or offer you the option to label it. And they will also, any good on-chain Bitcoin wallet will allow you to set a custom fee rate. Okay, that's and that's very important when the network gets really busy and the transaction fees might get quite high. Then you want to have your own control over how much fee you're prepared to pay for any given transaction. So with all of that, I'm happy, and I can create my transaction. So once I've created the transaction, it's going to ask me to verify all of the details and finalize the transaction for sending. And you'll see in Sparrow, there's a button for me to sign. And this basically is exactly the same as in blue wallets or green wallets or any other on-chain wallet. When you authorize to send from the wallets, you're effectively signing authorization for that transaction. That is what you're doing when you're sending Bitcoin. So when I sign this transaction, I'm authorizing it. And when I broadcast it, I'm telling the rest of the Bitcoin network, hey, I want to send these 10,000 sats to Destiny's address. They definitely belong to me. Here's my signature that proves ownership and that I have permission to send them. And so now we can actually go and look at this transaction on mempool for ourselves, and we can hopefully see it confirm. Give me a second. Let me switch. Okay, so good. There we see our transaction in the memory pool. So when we talk about it being in the mempool, it's sitting in the waiting room, waiting to be added to the blockchain. On the left-hand side here is we have all of the confirmed blocks. This is the existing blockchain up until the most very recent block. And on the right-hand side here, it might be the other way around for you. You can switch the direction like this. It's just a personal preference. It's aesthetic. It doesn't matter. This is the historical blockchain, and this is the new transactions that are pending, are waiting to be confirmed and added to the blockchain. So you can see currently our transaction is unconfirmed. You can see that we paid a fee rate of 4 sats per virtual bytes, which amounted to 561 sats in total. The total fee is calculated based on the weight of the transaction, and the weight is based on how much data you're taking up in the block. So the more complex your transaction, the more data is required to be stored in the blockchain, and therefore the higher the fee you will pay. So the fee is not based on the amount of money you're spending. Somebody who is sending $1 million worth of Bitcoin could potentially pay a lower fee than somebody who's sending $10 of Bitcoin, depending on the complexity of that transaction. So you can see this is just a very simple transaction. We had a single input, which is the 150,000 sats that were in my wallet. Okay. I then sent 10,000 sats over here to Destiny, and I paid the miner the 500, or I will pay the miner 561 sats when this block gets confirmed by whichever miner mines this block. And then you'll see there's this output, and this is just my change. Okay, this is my change. So when I send the Bitcoin to Destiny, I can't just break off 10,000 sats from my 150,000 sats input, because I just have this single input. I just received one lump sum of 150,000 sats from Padawan, and when I go to spend it, I have to spend the entire amount of that UTXO, which means a piece breaks off, it goes to Destiny, and the remaining piece is returned to me to a different address. And this old address, this unspent transaction output, is what it is known as, a UTXO, and you'll learn more about that in chapter 9, is then considered spent. And this particular output here can never be spent again. And this Bitcoin then belongs to these two unspent transaction outputs until they get spent. So we're still waiting for confirmation. We'll come back to this a bit later. Let's jump into the slides. After Destiny, I think Destiny, you've got a comment. Go ahead.
It's just a question.
Go ahead.
Please scroll down to the UTXO flow. The flow. Okay. So this is this part now. You said this other part, this the change that is left.
Yes.
It went to a new address. So do you mean that if I'm using this address, sorry. So do you mean that this address here and this address here are different from one another?
Yes, because this address belongs to me. This is my change. So if I go back to Sparrow, let me share again Sparrow, which is the wallet that I use to broadcast that transaction and to have a look at my balance and everything. If I now go back to just my balance over here, you'll see my balance is now 139,439 sats.
Yeah.
That's the same amount of sats that we saw there on mempool in that UTXO.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the amount that has been sent back to me. And you can see it says here unconfirmed. And we know it's unconfirmed because we see, we saw their block hasn't been found yet. And we can see from, if we look at this transaction, we can see that's the address that it gets sent to. So, in fact, no, here's the address, is the change address. So you can see the change of 139,439 sats to this address over here. I think I've just copied that. So if we go back to mempool now, oh, give me a second here. There we are. You can see that's the same address.
Yeah.
And if we go and have a look at this output over here, so this is called the input. We have one input and we have two outputs, and then we have the minus fee. So this output over here belongs to you, Destiny, and if I go in over there, I can see that's the address that I sent to. And it probably reflects in your Padawan wallet at this point, but as unconfirmed or pending, depending on the wallet. I'll use different words to show you that it's just waiting to be confirmed.
Yeah.
And now you'll see that address, it looks like you've reused that address before.
Your mic.
Because I can see, sorry, is my sound bad? Give me a second.
Yeah, echo and echo.
Okay, how's that?
Yeah, more better now.
Okay, there we go. So it looks like you've used the same address before. It's the same address that Padawan paid you to, because I can see there's your, in fact, no, that's my 150,000 sats, right? So let's see if we look at your address.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see you've got a balance in that address already. So that's interesting. Okay, anyway, moving on, let's get on with the slides, and then we can come back to this transaction once it's been confirmed.
Yeah.
So we'll also talk at the end about ways to get your hands on testnet coins over and above those Signet coins. There are other ways to get things like testnet 3 and 4 coins. But when it comes to real Bitcoin, which is actually what we're here to talk about, right, is how do we get our hands on the real stuff? So there are various ways. For example, you can get paid in Bitcoin in exchange for your work, and there's more on this in Chapter 8. You can mine Bitcoin, and there's more of this in Chapter 9. You can exchange your fiat currency for Bitcoin or vice versa in person. And then you can exchange your fiat currency for Bitcoin or vice versa online. And this is really how most people get their first Bitcoin, is they buy it online. And they just exchange their fiat currency for Bitcoin on an exchange. What most people don't know to do is then to remove the Bitcoin from the exchange to their own custody, so that the exchange can't run off with it, or a hacker can't get into the exchange and run off with it, or they can't pretend to have Bitcoin of yours that they don't really have. And the list goes on. So it's never a good idea to leave your Bitcoin on an exchange, and we'll talk a little bit about more about that when we get to that section. So peer-to-peer in person is really one of the best ways. If you're fortunate enough to live in a place that is a high enough population density that there's enough other Bitcoiners in your vicinity that you can actually buy and sell Bitcoin directly. Obviously, that's a huge challenge for most of us in Africa.
Yeah.
But Bitcoin meetups can be beneficial in establishing your own trusted peer-to-peer network. So if you are looking to, do something Bitcoin related, something as basic as a monthly meetup in your community to talk about Bitcoin is a great way to build a peer-to-peer network so that you can have other people to exchange your fiat or your Bitcoin for, and vice versa. So that's one of the best ways, really, is peer-to-peer, and it's even in the title of the Bitcoin white paper, a peer-to-peer electronic cash. So peer-to-peer transactions involve directly exchanging your fiat currency or any other goods or service, right? Don't forget, you can work for Bitcoin with another individual, eliminating the need for a bank or other third party to be involved. Both parties mutually determine the exchange amount and rate. So remember, Bitcoin doesn't have like a fixed price anywhere in the world. And in fact, if anything, in most of the poorer countries, we pay a substantial premium over the dollar price, the dollar spot price. So in South Africa, you can expect to pay easily 2 or 3% over the spot price on a centralized exchange, and you can expect to pay substantially more than that peer-to-peer. So, but this is negotiated between the buyers and the sellers when it's peer-to-peer. And of course, if you know each other well or you're friends, then, typically you'll do a fair trade and go at the market spot rates. But even then, the price of Bitcoin is just higher in South Africa than it is in America. And that's as a consequence, obviously, of having weaker currency and more difficult access to the underlying assets. So both parties mutually determine the exchange amounts and rate, and the buyer provides the cash, the seller transfers the Bitcoin, and the transaction concludes. So in the instance of this transaction between Destiny and I, we would ideally wait until that transaction is confirmed on the blockchain before we part ways. I don't want him to leave without my money until I know that transaction is confirmed. And let's have a look. It's still unconfirmed, so we're still waiting. I see there was a block found 6 minutes ago. Let me share this instead. So you can see our transaction is still unconfirmed. It's still waiting. So even though a block was found in the time that we've been sitting waiting, unfortunately, our transaction wasn't included in that block. And so I obviously didn't pay a high enough fee. If I'd paid a higher fee of 5 sats per virtual bytes, I would have been almost guaranteed to be in this block. You can see that the transactions in this block were paid a fee rate between 4 sats per virtual byte, which is what I did offer to what my transaction is paying. But so I must have just for whatever reason not made it into that block. We'll see. It looks like we'll get into the next block, which we should find in about 10 minutes. It says around 9 minutes. It'll be about 10 minutes on average to find a new block. So note that even though a block was found 7 minutes ago, it doesn't say we expect a block in 3 minutes, right? Even though we expect a block every 10 minutes, that's on average. And so at any given time, when we go to look, when is the next block, we can expect it to be 10 minutes because nobody's found one yet, right? So regardless of how long it's been, and sometimes it can go an hour, a couple of hours, or even longer between a block being found. And sometimes you can find 3 blocks in very quick succession. The Bitcoin network, however, regulates things in such a way that on average, a block is found approximately every 10 minutes. A little bit less, really, but the target's time is 10 minutes. let's have a look if we've got any questions there. We've got, peer-to-peer is a more safe and better way of exchanging Bitcoin. I agree with Destiny, definitely there. If you have access to peer-to-peer liquidity, that's first prize. And we'll come into the reasons why. Dennis says, how is that possible while exchanging your fiats? I'm not sure, Dennis, sorry, I missed what the context of that question is when you asked it. So if you could just clarify. I'll share that link for you guys to the Padawan wallet, but I'm sure Destiny can share that also in the group chat. Coming back here to the slides. We've got about 20 minutes to go, so we better start moving through the slides, but I'm glad we got the transaction out the way. We can look at that again tomorrow if needs be. So we'll see if we get clarity on your question there, Destiny, Dennis, and then I'll happily try and answer it. Or...
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Dennis, if you don't mind, you can come up and react your question.
While we wait, I'll just keep going. Destiny, Dennis, feel free to interrupt at any point and just clarify, or just type in the chat if you prefer. Just a little bit more clarity about your question. I'm not sure what you mean. How is that possible while exchanging your fiats? Moving on. While it is easier to do peer-to-peer, that's person-to-person, remember, peer-to-peer exchanges physically by meeting with another individual in the real world, you can also do so from virtually anywhere thanks to the internet. And so you do have many regions with robust local reputation-based peer-to-peer economies on social networking platforms like Telegram, WhatsApp, and Signal. So in South Africa, we do have a Signal group for Bitcoin maximalists. It's pretty well vetted. Only tried and true Bitcoiners with proof of work that have demonstrated that they are Bitcoin only are allowed into that group. And they then are able to buy and sell Bitcoin between them using any number of different payments, from meeting up to do cash transactions through to bank transfers, all person to person using Signal. And we're fortunate enough, because it's very well vetted, that there's never been a case of fraud. But that's something to be very, very wary of when using something like Telegram, WhatsApp, or Signal, is there's a huge amount of scammers out there. So if you are going to go that route, make sure that you're going through a group that has a very well vetted reputation with people, ideally, that you know. So again, like, caution should be exercised when using these social media platforms to try and buy and sell, unless, again, it's people that you know, or people that have been recommended to you by people that, have experience and do know, that they have a reputation. And there are various online platforms, and I think we do we'll probably comment on a couple of those in a few slides, that allow you to do this kind of person-to-person exchange without using social, Telegram, WhatsApp, or Signal, but are dedicated platforms specifically for buying and selling peer-to-peer, even with people that you don't know. And those are a little bit less fraught with fraud, because they require things like escrow and deposits from buyers and sellers and so on. So just watch out for that. But of course, in the Destiny and I know each other. So I can easily do a person-to-person trade with Destiny using WhatsApp. Right, even though we're not in the same country, we've never actually met in the flesh.
Yeah.
If I trust Destiny enough, we can do a person-to-person trade using a social media platform. So that's a social networking platform. So that's really what I would recommend, is reserving it ideally for people that you know, unless there is a good group with a solid reputation, such as what we have in South Africa. So exchange, go ahead.
No, like what you just said now really touched me because I was planning on having like this kind of WhatsApp, social media, social networking platform for P2P, where anyone can just come and say they want to buy, they want to sell. But mentioning you need to trust, verify, you need to know, no, they need to have the proof of work to state that yes, they really know what they are doing, so they can't run with your money. So that is really awesome. And another one was I was thinking is about having escrow. An admin can serve as an escrow to to this P2P stuff. So it's just crazy. It's still the ideology of bringing intermediary to the game. But I think this is something that maybe there will be a solution to this as we are going gradually. But I just thought of
Yeah,
saying
I'm
that.
sure.
Vexo.
Uh, mm, yeah, there are different tools that are developed from time to time, and the market adapts. So there used to be a great service called Local
Local Bitcoin.
Bitcoins that was used all over the world for
Yeah.
peer-to-peer trading until they were forced to KYC all of their customers. So we do need more decentralized solutions that are more difficult to shut down, and that's where things like RoboSats and Bisq and Hodl Hodl, these peer-to-peer online platforms, they're trying to address that gap. But there's very low liquidity in the African markets. There's not a lot of people seem to be buying or selling on these platforms yet, but hopefully, over time we'll see the numbers grow. So what we're talking about there specifically then is peer-to-peer online into peer-to-peer platforms where Bitcoin buyers and sellers meet in cyberspace to conduct transactions without any intermediaries directly on the internet. I would say that's not entirely correct to say without any intermediaries. With a lot of these peer-to-peer online platforms, the platform does act as an intermediary in that they might require an escrow. So regardless, they basically behave like what's the word I'm looking for here? But an unbiased intermediary, right? They don't have they don't have a dog in the fight when it comes to a dispute. So they're a fair intermediary to oversee that the transaction goes fairly. So with such platforms, you don't have to trust anyone with your information. That's one of the big upsides, is that you don't have to go through the same sign-in ID and KYC process as you do with centralized exchanges. Often you can use these just anonymously. However, your options for buying and selling are hugely limited. If you are trying to trade online anonymously, you'll find that a lot of the little bit of liquidity that are on these platforms, do require you to pay, usually through some KYC platform like your bank or whatever it may be.
Okay. Okay. Then
So
it's
using
sorry.
these
Sorry.
platforms, sorry, go ahead, Destiny.
So sorry. Then it's just clarified on what you mean.
Clarified. Let's have a look there. It says, is that peer-to-peer transactions is with a particular Bitcoin wallet that peer-to-peer transactions is possible. I don't really understand. Maybe, Dennis, I haven't explained properly what I mean by a peer-to-peer exchange. But in this example transaction that I've done with Destiny, right, the $8, I could have said to Destiny, I want to sell 10,000 sats for $8. And he would have accepted the offer. So he sends me his Bitcoin address. I send him the $8 worth of Bitcoin, and he gives my family member over there in where are you again? Remind us, Destiny.
Let me say it the way you guys say it. Lagos.
Lagos. Okay, so you give my family member over there in Lagos the $8 who needs it.
Yeah.
And that way we've done a peer-to-peer transaction, right? And any Bitcoin wallet will obviously allow me to send my Bitcoin to anybody else on Earth. And so that's a peer-to-peer transaction. Any Bitcoin wallet can facilitate that
Yeah.
without anybody's permission. And there's very few other platforms that could be said of. I mean, any other service that would allow me to send money from here to Lagos there's going to be a middleman, and it's going to require their permission and authorization. Okay, excellent. Glad you got it there, Dennis. Glad I could answer it. So we'll move on. We've got about 10 minutes to go. So if you guys have questions, please feel to drop them in the comments there, or just speak up before we run out of time. And then meanwhile, I'll keep going, but please don't be shy to interrupt. So with these platforms, you don't have to trust anyone with your information or your money. You can meet with other peers and trade with them directly. Most peer-to-peer platforms require peers to escrow some of the funds to ensure that they will comply with their part of the deal. Escrow means putting the money in a place that the platform controls until both parties do what they promised. It's like a trusted friend holding onto your stuff until everyone keeps their word. So it makes it impossible for me to say, hey, I'm going to send you the 10,000 sets as soon as you pay me, Destiny, and then running off with the sats and the money once Destiny pays me. The escrow makes, and the platform makes sure that they've got the sats first, and they only release the sats to Destiny once I've confirmed, okay, Destiny gave the money to my uncle. So then centralized exchanges, these are how most people get their Bitcoin, and you'll probably have heard of exchanges like Binance, Luna, Valor. Used to be Paxful, was very useful for peer-to-peer. I don't think they're around anymore. But these are all examples of exchanges, and these are often mistaken by newcomers as wallets. When people go, oh yeah, I've got Bitcoin, it's in my wallet. It's in my Binance wallet, okay? So this is a misunderstanding. There we go. We've got our first confirmation. Destiny, you should see those sats reflecting in your Padawan wallet. These are not wallets, okay? These are exchanges, and these are what I personally urge people not to leave their Bitcoin on such platforms for any longer than is necessary. So in an ideal world, as soon as you've bought your Bitcoin on the centralized exchange, if you have to use a centralized exchange like Binance, as soon as you've bought the Bitcoin, withdraw it off of the exchange into self-custody. It's very, very important, because none of these exchanges can be trusted. The last 16 years has been demonstrated, that it's very unwise to leave your Bitcoin on these exchanges. And it's almost certain that most of them are running fractional reserve by now. If you don't at least suspect they're running fractional reserve, then I don't think you've been concentrating about what banks have been doing the last 50 years or longer. So these exchanges function like banks. And so don't be surprised if they're fractional reserve, and if everybody goes to withdraw their Bitcoin at the same time, that they don't have it all. That's pretty much what happened with FTX, right? They had none of the Bitcoin that they said that they had of their customers. They'd gambled it all on shitcoins. So then the market moved against them, and they lost everybody's Bitcoin. Centralized exchanges then. Using centralized exchanges may be the easiest way to acquire and sell Bitcoin, but it also involves significant trade-offs. Centralized exchanges are companies that allow clients to buy and sell Bitcoin directly through them. However, this convenience comes at a cost. It's important to note that when buying Bitcoin through a centralized exchange, you are often required to provide personal information and verify your identity. This creates a risk of identity theft and exposes your personal information to potential threats. It also permanently ties that Bitcoin that you acquire on that exchange to your personal identity, and that information is often sold to surveillance companies and chain analysis companies, and you could be sure would be openly provided to any governments that demanded such data be made available. So this is an important risk to consider when you KYC on these exchange. You're not just risking your identity, but you're also permanently KYCing the Bitcoin that you acquire on that exchange. They are basically permanently stamped with your personal identity in a sense, because that exchange knows who you are, and they know exactly on the blockchain which Bitcoin belong to you, because the blockchain is open and transparent. So if you tie any Bitcoin to your identity, it's permanently tied to your identity. And this is another important consideration when you come in later chapters to UTXO management, so managing your unspent Bitcoin. It's important that if you are going to consider the implications of KYC'd Bitcoin or Bitcoin that is tied to your identity, that you keep your KYC'd Bitcoin separate from your Bitcoin that you've got maybe person to person and that only Destiny and I know about, right? So in that situation where I sent those 10,000 sats directly to Destiny, it might be wise for Destiny to keep those sats in a completely separate wallet to where he keeps his Binance stack. So this additionally, centralized exchanges hold your Bitcoin for you, which means you're not in control of your money until you withdraw it from them. And I'm sure you've heard by now, not your keys, not your coins. And it can't be said enough because people don't seem to learn this very simple truth. Don't chase yield. Don't give your Bitcoin up to some exchange because they tell you, oh, you should be earning 5% on your Bitcoin. You're going to lose 100% of your Bitcoin chasing pennies. So to add to these concerns, centralized exchanges can misappropriate users' funds, or they lend more Bitcoin than they have in reserves until they collapse. And that's in essence what happened with FTX, just like the banks. However, in the Bitcoin world, there's no central bank to bail out fraudulent banks by printing more currency because you can't print more Bitcoin, right? They can't bail out the exchanges by just printing more Bitcoin. They can bail out the banks, no problem. They just call the money printer and print, baby, print. They bailed them out. That's what they did in 2008. They bailed out the banks at the cost of the taxpayer. And then, of course, don't forget there's bail-ins. So in Greece, they bailed the banks out with the depositors' money. They didn't even go and print some more dirty fiat. They took the depositors' money and bailed out the banks, called the bail-in instead of bail-out. And so if an exchange collapses and you can't print more Bitcoin, well, your best bet is then going to be a bail-in with whatever Bitcoin might be left. And so any Bitcoin that is on an exchange in that kind of situation, you can consider as good as lost. So that's why I said I don't leave the Bitcoin on exchange longer than is necessary. As soon as you've bought it, get it off there. There's no reason, especially when the fees are low. If the fees are like 2-3 sats per virtual byte, then there's no good reason to be leaving substantial value on an exchange for longer than you need. Binance has Lightning withdrawals, which means you can even withdraw small amounts, even if it's just $5 or $10 or whatever. But obviously, if your exchange doesn't have support for Lightning, then the fees are a consideration, in which case, withdraw as often as you can. Right, so we are, I think, out of time. We're at the top of the hour, Destiny. We only got through 10 slides, but that's fine because tomorrow it'll go a little bit quicker with that transaction out of the way. I will just show you guys quickly before I hand over to Destiny and say goodbye. You can see here's our transaction. It now has 2 confirmations, which means it was added 2 blocks away in the Signet block 238,313. And then another block has subsequently been found after that, which is why we have 2 confirmations. Destiny, thanks very much. Over to you. I'm happy also to stay a bit longer and answer any questions or explore this transaction a bit longer if you like.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this awesome section. And then we also learned on how we can check out what's going on with our transaction. And guys, I've gotten my 10,000 sats, although it's a fake coin, but at least I am 10,000 richer than some people. So I really appreciate the fake coin, Glenn. And you see how easy it is to send Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not hard to send or receive. It's very, very easy. I know most of us might be wondering, how can we set up our Bitcoin wallet? Don't worry, there's going to be a time where we'll take you through the process on how you can set yours up. So just feel free, and also you are free to also do your own research on things, but make sure that once you are doing your research, you always like come and share what you explore, because it's very good for you to also like share it with everyone. So guys, we enjoyed, I hope all of us enjoyed this session today. Who have any direct questions to ask, or who have any uncertainty to clear before Glenn, before we call it a day? But Glenn, you can see in the chat box, if I'm out, okay, Dennis, go ahead.
Please, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfectly, yeah.
Like, I'm trying different type of light wallets, right?
Sorry, you cut out a little bit there. Could you go again?
Like, there are different kinds of lightning wallets, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So we're gonna cover the different kinds of wallets through is it this chapter? In fact, I think we do cover different types of wallets in this. But like Boson points out correctly there, one distinction is custodial and non-custodial, which is quite an important consideration when it comes to Lightning wallets, because the transaction fees, the cost of having a non-custodial Lightning wallet is higher. There's no ways around that. Custodial wallets such as Blink or Wallet of Satoshi, they function very much like exchange, like in that they are the custodians of your Bitcoin. You're trusting that they actually do have the Bitcoin that they say they do. You're also trusting them to allow you to continue to send your Bitcoin wherever you please. So you're having to trust the custodian with whatever value you leave in their custody. Then you do also have non-custodial Lightning wallets, and these allow you to be in a position to hold the keys to your Bitcoin in such a way that the wallet provider can't run off with your Bitcoin, or a hacker can't hack their services and steal your Bitcoin, because you have the keys to your Bitcoin. But this does come with the added cost of not just higher fees, but also technical overhead. You do need to be, I would say, a little bit more advanced user than just like brand new. Especially to make the extra cost worthwhile. You'd want to be using it regularly. So non-custodial is always first prize. I mean, you always want to ideally, and that's why I say don't leave your Bitcoin on exchange. Take it into self-custody as soon as you humanly can. But when I say that, I'm talking about your savings stack, okay? I'm talking about your Bitcoin. That's not like your day-to-day, like it's not what you're going to go and show your friends, like, hey, look how easy Bitcoin is to use, or let me go and support the local business that accepts Bitcoin by buying a cup of coffee with him. Those are two different use cases. And I think most people are primarily focused on hopefully long-term savings. And so that's mainly what I'm focused on when I say don't leave your coins on custodial services. I'm talking about your savings. Even I make the trade-off for my like spending stat, my day-to-day spending Bitcoin because we're fortunate here in South Africa. It's very easy. I can buy my groceries, I can pay my utility bills, I can live on Bitcoin here. And so I use it quite a lot. But even I make the trade-off of using things like Blink, and Blink is an excellent Lightning wallet, but it is custodial. But I use it with the understanding that it's custodial. I'm fortunate enough that I've met the team, well, some of the team, both online and in person, and I do think they have the best interests of the network